Boom. We're live now. Nobody freeze up. All right, I'm going to do the intro and we do it unique each time just so there's mostly to save editing. Welcome to, nope, I've never actually hosted before, by the way, so I'm usually the guest host. This is the Data-Driven Marketer, sponsored by NetWise. I'm Brian.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Rand.
All right. Welcome back to the Data Basement, everybody. Thanks as always to our listeners. We really appreciate you spending time with us. It means a lot to us, and we do this for you. And thank you to our guest this week, Rand Fishkin. Rand, I really appreciate you taking time to hang out with us. It's been really fun so far. I'm excited to chat while we're recording now.
My pleasure.
Do you mind if I throw to you for a little intro to just talk a little bit about your background?
Throw away.
Awesome. Well, go for it. Tell us what you're up to.
Here's the pitch.
Oh, what am I up to? Let's see. I am currently working on a video game, which is to be announced. I am the game's director, creative director, and also
Awesome.
the person funding it. Which is fun. Many folks will know me from a company called Moz, which I co-founded and led as CEO for many years. And I left that company about 4 years ago and started a new company in the marketing software business, which I realize NetWise is also in, called SparkToro.
Awesome.
SparkToro does audience research, helps lots of marketers find the sources of influence for their audiences through collecting lots of passive data at scale. Not dissimilar to what NetWise does, actually, but kind of a self-service product for individual consultants and agencies and in-house marketers. And then what else am I doing? I am experimenting with a lot of cocktails and pasta. I'm about to speak at my first conference in almost 2 years.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Where will that be?
In real life, obviously I've done lots of digital events.
An actual physical person in a space.
Yeah, but an actual physical person event in Milan, Italy, where you have to have a vaccination in order to enter any indoor places. And so I was like, well, okay, that sounds pretty safe. And their caseload in Lombardy, which is the region where Milan is, has collapsed pretty low. I think they had like 345 cases or something last week. So
yeah,
I'm feeling relatively safe about going there.
Good.
Maybe a little nervous still.
Better than where we were a year ago.
Yeah. Oh my God. Lombardy was hit so hard.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
For the millionth time, what a bizarre time period we've all been living through. This will be just remembered our whole lives.
Yeah, just terrible. You guys probably saw the graphic that was like making its way around Twitter and LinkedIn yesterday. That was, that COVID has now been deadlier than all American deaths in all foreign wars combined. I was like, oh my God.
It's tragic.
It is. That's
but
important.
like we all know people who've passed away, right? Like I lost a cousin and 3 friends, and it's just mind numbing the quantity of people who've died.
It is. It is. So let me wind it back to the Moz days, and just to kind of set the stage a little bit. How did you get that going? Because I know you had companies even before that too, but I'm kind of curious for you personally. Like, what was your involvement? What do you do professionally at the companies you work at?
Let's see. So Moz was my first company. I dropped out of college to basically start that business with my mom.
Nice.
Jillian. Yeah. And before that, the only places I worked at a men's clothing store for a little while in college.
Awesome.
I did not get accepted at the men's clothing store I applied to. So you got that one on me.
It didn't go well. I was their worst salesperson by a good margin.
That's hilarious.
I'm somewhat embarrassed about that. I did build their website though. So that kind of kickstarted a lot of my journey into marketing and SEO and content and all that. So at Moz, I started that, Brian, through blogging. Like I was writing 5 nights a week, just about search engine optimization at a time when very few people practice that. And there was very little belief that it was a real marketing practice. There was very little trust and faith in it. Mark, you were talking earlier about like how, before we started the recording, about like how untrustworthy the field of SEO was and like perceived as very black hat and snake oil. And Moz was kind of this, I tried to make it anyway, like an oasis for people who were like, no, SEO is a real practice. And if you earn rankings in Google, you can get lots of traffic. And if you do it the right way, Google's not going to like penalize you and throw the book at you. And there's ways to do it that are not sketchy and spammy. And yeah, eventually that built a very large business. So, I raised some money, some venture capital, was a CEO for 7 years, grew it to about $40 million in revenue, stepped down as CEO, stayed around for a few more years, which was probably a mistake. And then wrote a book about it, which I think, Mark has checked out, called Lost and Founder.
Very compelling read. Yep.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And then left the company in 2018.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you took a very like current modern approach to starting that company, maybe by accident, by like building community first, right? And trying out ideas and seeing what happens. And then it's interesting there because I wasn't sure if you were going to say you're a marketer or a business person or an engineer or what. And Moz is such a technical product. I remember using it 10 years ago when I was starting my first company. And I remember being so fascinated by the fact that you had basically like a Moz version of Google PageRank, I think, that I could compare to. And I was like, man, that seems really technically complex to be building right now as like another tech startup. So
yeah, I technically own a patent for a version of PageRank, right? Or a similar system. Yeah. So like domain authority and Moz rank specifically, and Moz trust, which is sort of modeled on the concept of trust rank. And I mean, I would not urge any founders in software, especially marketing software, to like go get patents now. But at the time, our venture investors would like, you should go get a patent.
Totally.
Okay.
That's
hilarious. Brian, I don't know are you getting those? Are you getting people tell you to patent stuff here? I don't know. Brian's one of our he's our CTO, chief engineer.
Yeah. I mean, it's
coder
still
extraordinaire.
It still gets talked about, right? It's still a really complex topic for tech businesses, right? Because it really serves a valuable component in physical product, right? I come from a manufacturing background, actually, so patents are really important in other industries, but they're just so complex with software. It's a whole different thing, and a lot of people just haven't caught up. Like the legal system hasn't caught up to that yet. So,
yeah, I think the world of software patent trolling actually had a huge negative impact on like the value and respect that patents get, right? So I think like when we were first applying for them, there were lots of people who were like, oh, that's really cool that, Moz has a patent on this methodology. And within a few years, people were like, are you going to start suing other companies? Like, you buttholes.
Yeah, why is this not in your business plan to be going after people who have invented software on their own that does the same thing? Yeah. It's a complex problem for sure, but
as if there aren't enough games of whack-a-mole in the marketing sphere.
I think if I remember correctly, it was either like right as I was leaving the CEO role or just after I'd stepped down. But Moz basically entered into this kind of community-wide agreement that we would only use our patents defensively. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the right way to play it, right? If you go after people for using similar software technology, that there's not a lot of honor or ethics there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I picked up on a lot of intentional, progressive, and I mean that just in sort of intentional progress, energy from you from our original conversation. And I love that you drive things like that in your business culture, right? It's up to business owners to do that.
No, I'm really proud of that. I mean, I would use progressive in all its aspects, right?
Yeah.
Like Moz was, and SparkToro is, and I think all the projects that I'm involved in are both that from a political lens, but also from I don't want to do things the way they have been done classically. I think that there is value in innovation. I think there's competitive advantage to be found there. I think it's more fun and exciting and interesting.
Totally.
I like putting on my creative and artistic lens, even when I think about just business model generation.
Yep. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a great way to, I think, a great segue to something we were rapping about in batting practice, which was the shifting landscape and need for creativity, and kind of how technology advancements and innovation are stimulating and motivating creativity, both in the marketing space, and in the general information and creative space as well. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how you're seeing technology kind of spurring creativity in the marketing world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a whole bunch of them. One of the biggest ones is just the barrier to entry has been lowered, right? Mm-hmm. You can go on YouTube or to 100 websites and learn to code for free from anywhere on the planet. If you're sort of have an internet connection and a computer and the ability to, the time and energy to kind of learn from other folks and the freedom to do that. That's kind of beautiful, right? I love it. Mm-hmm. I also love that you can do that with, whatever you want. Digital art. You can do it with music and sound creation. You could do it with video. Might be a little more expensive with video. You need equipment. You can do it with writing a book. You can do it with writing a blog post. You can do it with starting a podcast. The list is just incredibly long, right? So that barrier to entry has been lowered, which brings a ton more people into the field. And, and you get negative externalities around this, right? There's like a whole bunch of people who have been convinced that like lizard people rule pizza dungeons, right. in the government or whatever, right? And okay, that's not great. Like that's a negative externality from a result of like anyone can create content and amplify it. Yeah. But there's lots of positives from that too, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of folks would point to, social movements around things like drug legalization or. If you are a fan of this, I'm not personally, but I respect people who are, right? If you love cryptocurrency, you'd be like, hey, that could not have been enabled, 15, 20 years ago, and it is today. Mm-hmm.
I was saying crypto is kind of big in our listenership, so it's okay. Yeah, right? we love a good debate.
Yeah, I mean, my bias against it does not have to yuck your yum, right? Maybe you like peanut butter and banana sandwiches. I don't have to like them for you to enjoy them, right? Like you can get a kick out of cryptocurrency and you don't need me to participate. So awesome. Have fun.
Yuck your yum is definitely our opening quote for this episode. I love that.
I don't like to yuck anybody else's yum.
That's super nice.
The only time I don't like it is when it harms other people, right? So like
totally.
If you have your thing and it doesn't hurt anybody else, awesome. Yep. I love it. Right. Like, go for it. If you want to wear Hawaiian shirts every day and, party like it's 1999, like, hey, don't let me stop you. Prince was great. But, it's, I have my own style. That's great too.
I was going to say this, it seemed like we had a good connection around and the ability to kind of spin up your own thought leadership channel, right? Like this democratization of data, of technology has kind of, it has enabled, like you said, some nefarious players or, conspiracy type players in the space. But I think more often than not, the beauty of the internet and the beauty of tools like Moz and SparkToro is that it allows people who are just, an individual creator, an individual entrepreneur to go out and take what's in their brain, take these big ideas and see, like, is there a community out there? Validate that. Am I the person educating? Am I the person being educated? And what are the lessons I've learned from that? I think that's ultimately that's what we were all hoping social media would do for us and not turn us into like backstabbing ogres. But,
but instead it's done both, right? So like there's I think this is just how a lot of technological progress goes, right? Mm-hmm. That I don't know if you've ever read like, examples from kind of European Middle Ages stuff where people are complaining about literacy, right? Like, oh no, too many people, farmers and peasants and like folks are learning to read. And this will be the end of modern civilization as we know it, because once they learn to read and write, they'll spread all these terrible ideas and yada, yada. And generally speaking, people learning to read and write is now viewed as universal good. Right? I mean, unless unless you're the
That's
Taliban
hilarious.
in Afghanistan or something, right?
Right.
But like almost everybody else, right, is like, yes, this is a good thing. So I kind of hope that if we progress the timeline out far enough, there will be this, hey, everyone being able to be a creator is good. Content moderation guidelines are good.
Mm-hmm.
Regulating algorithms that optimize for engagement is good. And like we find our healthy balance in this new world. And is there a lot of turmoil around it right now? Absolutely. Is there a lot of opportunity? Definitely.
Tremendous. Yeah, I think it's really
huge.
important to remember that both things happen, right? With technology and with everything. And I always like the concept of kind of considering everything to be technology, like the universe is a technology at a fundamental level. So you can always, we're creatures, we can always do good or bad. And even that is debatable, right? Depending on the situation. So I find it interesting to kind of bring it back into marketing a little bit specifically. There's a lot of the same issues, like if we avoid like the real specific of like Facebook's doing this or Google's doing this, just within marketing from a business perspective, right? From how we operationally do our jobs as marketers, there's a lot of that same debate, right? It's like what is okay for marketers to leverage in terms of data and information about individuals and businesses, and where can you get that from, and how can you use it, and what should we be doing with it? Are you running into things like that, or how are you thinking about that with SparkToro?
Yeah, no, great question, because SparkToro, is obviously built on essentially people's public social and web profile data, right? So like we crawl 10 different social networks and websites and about pages and that kind of stuff, and then we like try and link them all up and then make that indexable. And we anonymize it, of course, right? So that like you can't go find, oh, well, here's Brian, and here's Mark, and here's Jess, and here's Rand. But rather that, I want to see what people in higher education in Michigan follow online, right? And so it's like, okay, we're going to take, 752 profiles that match. I'm in the higher ed industry and I'm in Michigan, and like, okay, what YouTube channels they subscribe to the most? All right, well, 771 subscribe to this channel, so 10%. That's our estimate, right? And then like you get data like that. But yeah, to your point, right? Like we had to jump through a bunch of legal hoops early on around this stuff, both GDPR as well as some other EU privacy laws, and then California privacy protection.
Yep.
Sorry, is it
CCPA?
CCPA.
Yeah,
Consumer
exactly.
Protection Act, something like that.
Yeah, and I think that there's good and bad things about that. Like, if I were writing GDPR, there's no way I would structure it the way it is, right? Because it basically said, it's sort of a declaration from like Europe. They're like, we promise we will never make a company that competes effectively against Google and Facebook.
Right.
Like, we swear to God, we'll never compete with you American companies. And, you kind of like, you look into the depths of it and you can see that Google and Facebook funded the researchers who advised the EU council that created it. And you're like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. I love
you guys are dicks.
Yeah, you guys are.
But yeah, the
feedback looping me.
There's some misaligned incentives there, and I think that's been frustrating. I think there's good things that it includes, right, around like email protection and that sort of stuff. But by and large, that has been a process where, thankfully, some of the work that Google actually pioneered, where they basically said, hey, if Google is allowed to crawl and index your website and then show data on its website, so is anybody else who crawls and indexes the web. So like if you make things public on the web, I think there was a case against, I believe it was LinkedIn was suing someone who like crawled their data, and the judge was like, this is public data. People are allowed to visit these pages publicly, which means a machine can visit them fast and then show that data to someone, just like Google can, or Yahoo, or Bing, or AskJeeves.com or whoever, right? Like they're all allowed. So I don't think Ask Jeeves still exists, but
the good old days.
Yeah, you touch on a really important part, kind of back to the tech enabling creativity. This is one of those places where the technology comes in and it's just doing something that we used to do ourselves, right? Like I would go read a bunch of websites, but now a computer can do it a billion times a day, right? And that super well from all the work you've done with Moz. So that completely changes how things work, right? It changes how we produce content. It changes how content gets disseminated. It changes how we like moderate economic incentives for businesses and creatives. And that just totally upends traditional structures in so many ways. So what's your goal with SparkToro right now? How does that play into the space? Because you're consuming a tremendous amount of information. And it's actually interesting too, because you said you're only 3 people, but you're doing something that 10 years ago would have taken a unicorn to be doing, right?
Yeah, that's, I was blown away, by the way, just when you said it's a 3-person team. I was, I'm still in a state of shock that you're such a robust platform. So it's really impressive.
Yeah. And 3 months ago, there were only 2 of us. But yeah, so basic story there, right? My goal is help marketers do audience research more quickly and far more accurately and at scale with numbers that they can really trust. Like, if you survey 100 higher ed folks in Michigan and ask them what YouTube channels they watch, and it's like, oh yeah, I love the guy who talks about, have you checked your butthole? It's like, okay, that's not helpful. That doesn't tell me what people. It could be true, right? It could be true that, like, I think his name is Tom Capper, right? He has a popular like YouTube, TikTok presence, whatever. Yeah. Great, I love him. I think he's hilarious. It does not tell me where to do marketing to higher ed professionals in Michigan.
Right.
And so what you actually want is you want to, in an ideal world, like go get the home addresses of 1,000 Michigan higher ed folks and then go to their house and break in and steal their phone and get their unlock code and like scroll through their YouTube subscriptions and then like copy them all down. But that browsing, of course, that is highly illegal and super unethical, even if it were illegal. And I cannot recommend against that enough. So the alternative is, well, a significant percent of those people say on, whatever, LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, like who they are, right? And it says, okay, they work at a university or whatever, an administrator, blah, 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 blah. And you can find their YouTube profile, and then you can look at the channels they subscribe to because it's public, right? For many people on YouTube. And so you'd be like, aha, there you go. Look at these ones are popular. And this is not like a negative thing. You're not harming any individual person or any group of people. You're simply saying, hey, all that data that Google and Facebook hoard about user behavior online, we are going to go get it for you so that you can have it at your fingertips and you can make smart decisions about, do you want to throw your money at Google and Facebook ads? Do you maybe want to go directly to the YouTube channels that and the creators that your audience listens to and pays attention to, and maybe do some co-marketing with them or pitch them on being on their show, or or like reach out and offer to sponsor their thing, like whatever you want, or hey, maybe we could sponsor your email newsletter to your list or whatever. Awesome. Like these are all great things that marketers should be able to have in their toolboxes. And unless you have that data at your fingertips with real numbers, you just can't justify it. Yeah.
Interesting. So are you focused specifically on the types of content that are harder to get into right now? Because like the 2 examples you just gave, their podcast and YouTube, I can't enter that in a technical data-driven marketing sense very easily right now. That's very hard to get into with my ads. So is that a space you're particularly interested in?
Yeah, that's it. So that's exactly right. So, podcasts, YouTube, people's organic social feeds, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, GitHub, Quora, Medium, Pinterest, like we're in all of those places, Instagram, all those, and then websites and press accounts, right? So like essentially press publishers and industry publications. Right. Okay. So it's kind of discovering that stuff. Like if you're a marketer and you've been in the higher ed marketing space for like 10 years, you probably know all of these. Like you have an intuitive understanding of like, yeah, it's probably these publications, it's probably these channels. You'll find some surprises. You'll be like, oh, I didn't know that podcast was so popular with our audience or whatever. But in general, you probably have a good, but if you've never done higher ed marketing before and it's your first day and you're in an agency and your new client comes to you, you'd be like, oh crap. let me just run over SparkToro and like quickly get this data and understand this field. And that's really what it's useful for. So we're trying to kind of disintermediate the data that Google and Facebook already have at their fingertips that they use to kind of lock out the rest of the marketing ecosystem.
Right. I love that. I love that vision. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, from working in this evolving space of growth hacking, growth marketing, and I know the term growth hacking has since Hackles up. Yeah, it's flywheels, not hacks. I know. But from being pressed in this was 2 positions ago, like six years ago, from being really pressed as hey, you're the guy who knows SEO. You've worked in post. You've worked in sponsored content and integrated marketing partnerships and link building and stuff. So I came on to an app that was looking to increase ARR, and it was one of those things where certain podcasts were doing really well, certain ones were super expensive and bleeding our marketing budget dry.
Yeah,
and how do you really know what how your money is going to perform until you kind of throw it out there and test it? That's you want to be able to make as informed a decision as you can. And so, we spent a lot with NPR, assuming, hey, they're NPR. Obviously, they're going to, these are highly intelligent, slightly, lefty leaning folks. And we were a very, SRI investment app at the time, called Swell. And so we thought, hey, obviously that's a direct hit. Of course, it's going to be huge. Nobody is like crickets from Marketplace on NPR, and nothing against Marketplace.
So I kind of feel
it's a wonderful show, but for some reason we found our people elsewhere. And, maybe if we'd had a tool like this, we would have saved a couple $1,000, but
I am surprised. So one of the reasons we looked into this because some folks who were using SparkToro were like, gosh, a lot of NPR podcasts, which I would expect to come up, don't come up in your index as often as we were to anticipate. And we were like, oh, let's go dig into that. And it's not that they're not popular. The problem is that much like the YouTuber I was mentioning earlier, they're popular with too broad an audience.
Right.
So it's you're not getting the specificity of the group that you're going after. And so this is like, if we were to just say, okay, who's the most followed person on Twitter by higher ed folks in Michigan? It's Barack Obama. And you're like, oh, that's super not helpful.
That's
right. That's not the number you're looking for. You're not looking for Barack Obama. You are looking for, and number 2 before he was banned would have been Donald Trump. Right. And so that's not what you're interested in. What you want to know is, compared to a population of everyone else, what is uniquely most followed by this audience? And so that's the math that kind of like, it's no math at all, right? Anyone who's done like statistics is like, I can do that in Excel in 2 minutes. I know you can. It's easy. We do it too, right? And so like, great. But then we can say, okay, show me what's uniquely well followed by higher ed folks in Michigan, or architects in Los Angeles, or chemical engineers in the UK, or whatever your audience is that you're going after. And that's the kind of, it's not secret sauce. It is transparent sauce, right? The opposite of secret sauce. But it's super useful because it'll tell you exactly, if you're like, hey, I want to find people who are interested in personal finance world, and they tend to be, whatever, in, I don't know, the Northeast of the US, like, show me those people. Okay, well, I can tell you that I don't know, I could look it up, but maybe it's like fool.com and nerdwallet.com and, whatever it is.
Forbes or so, something. Those highly, it's finding that highly relevant, highly targeted niche content that's trustworthy.
This is so much more valuable of a way of doing marketing, right? To essentially like have in your brain as an entrepreneur or a marketer, like you want to get in your brain this idea of an influence map. Like, how are people in my universe influenced? What do they pay attention to? How do they discover new products and services and ideas? And then how do they make decisions? And those could all be different, right? So it might be like, oh yeah, a lot of people in our world, like they pay attention to these sources, but that's actually not where they get their, like, I find out about new products from, maybe they get it from Instagram ads. Like that could be possible in a lot of consumer product goods spaces. fashion, like fast fashion, especially, right? Instagram is how people discover stuff, right? So fine.
Yeah, you're touching on a really, really relevant concept as like an example for what we're trying to get across on this podcast, the data-driven marketer, right? That the concept of looking for like what is statistically common among your target market, but also specific to your target market is a very complex combination of variables, right? That affects a lot of things. It affects what your budget is and your click-through rate or your conversion rates. And like
the whole media plan. Yeah.
It's simple once you start to get it in your mind, but it's kind of counter to what marketing has been historically forever. And if you're new to marketing, it's really counter, right? Because you think Super Bowl ads, right? If you're new to marketing, you're like, it's about getting exposure to lots of people. And that's not at all what it is anymore. If you're like, especially our customers are B2B marketers, right? So they're very explicit with their budget. Like they've got a lot of oversight on it. They're usually really niche little products that they're selling to niche markets. And so really interesting way to put that into share that's super relevant for our listeners.
You know what I found really frustrating? I'm sure you guys will resonate with this because it's like, it's just one of the most mind-numbingly awful verbiage, like lexicon problems in marketing, which is essentially when I was starting SparkToro, right? Before we ever had a product, I would like, get on the phone with or Zoom or whatever with like tons of marketers like yourselves. I'd be like, hey, what do you call the process of discovering your audience's sources of influence so you can go do marketing through them? And they'd be like, I do that work, but I have no name for it.
Huh.
I actually believe that is fundamentally at the core of the problem. Like, I think because there's no word for that, marketers don't budget for it. CEOs don't like have that role. Nobody does that formally. There's no agencies that like tell you, oh yeah, we're a blah, 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 blah agency, right? And so because they don't have a word for the research process of finding sources of influence, you get this huge thing. It used to be called influencer marketing.
Right.
For like a brief window. And then all of a sudden, all these dudes started taking off their shirts and having 6-packs on beaches and being like, pay me $500 to pose with your product, bro. And now that's influencer marketing.
Well, what's really cool about...
let me take a stab at that if I may, Brian. Sorry. I would call it.
Mark, keep your shirt on, man.
It's not, wait.
Well, everybody's shirts are coming off now.
Wait. I want to take a stab at the former topic, not the latter.
Okay.
That's the key.
Sorry, my bad.
I am in training for a marathon, but I'll spare you the shirtless.
I mean, hang on. Let me just make you full screen on my monitor here.
Oh, you know how to make a guy feel good. But key trust research is my stab at that instead of keyword research, because I think essentially what you're looking for is this kernel of trust, right? In all of these influencers, it's not necessarily about how big your following is. It's about the quality of the information and the reliability. So I look to a guy like Gotham Chess. I'm a sub 800 chess player who's wanting to get better. So I go to this guy, Levy from New York, his Gotham Chess. And so if someone, if you want to get through to me, target Gotham Chess, like, cause that's where my trust base lives. Yep. So that's the way, as a marketer in this space, that's my stab at defining what your question there.
No, I think this is exactly right. I subscribe to Taste Magazine, it's a newsletter, an online newsletter. It's food centric. I don't think it's very well followed. Like, they have very few, Twitter and social followers and whatever, but really excellent content when they do publish stuff and very trustworthy, and they recommend products. And I'll be honest, like, I don't think a month has gone by since I subscribed to them where I haven't seen something that's covered in taste and then bought it. Like last month, I think it was salsa matcha. And the month before that, it was dark soy sauce, which I was like, there's a dark and a light soy sauce? I'm checking all this stuff out. I'm like, oh man, I got to get this. I spent like $200 on a rice donabe, this like Japanese clay pot that's made in this one prefecture that's absolutely beautiful and makes perfect rice. And I was convinced because, I got this thing that I subscribe to it would not matter how many Instagram ads I saw for a donabe. It would never change my mind. But as soon as Taste wrote about it, boom, I'm in.
Yeah, you nailed it. I love that name you just gave up, Mark. Key Trust Research, because it's exactly. I have the exact same thing going on with a website that used to be the Wirecutter. I think New York Times bought them now.
Yeah.
But it was the only place I ever went in my life where they did as thorough research into things as I enjoy doing. So I got all the knowledge and the fun of the process, and then I could totally trust what to buy there. And the trust is, it's kind of it's almost a new thing, right? And this goes back to what I was going to say a minute ago about a point you said. Marketing is a really neat space right now because the tech is constantly changing. And so what you can do is constantly changing. And then what you can imagine to do a year from now is where you can innovate.
So I somewhat agree, but there's a part of me that kind of disagrees with the idea that this is new, because I think when I go like, if you go watch Mad Men or whatever, or like put yourself in the shoes of a 1950s like ad exec, there was absolutely that same concept of we need to be in Popular Mechanics magazine with an ad whose message is like this, and it needs to be across from this story because that's where we're going to reach. My grandmother, totally right. She just passed away last year, but she's 94. And every time I flew out to New York, so I'm in Seattle, right? Every time I flew out to New York, my grandmother would have a bunch of literal newspaper clippings, right? Like she had cut out of the newspaper the theater review section for like the last few months. And she was like, Rand, I want you to look at the theater reviews. This is from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. I don't trust the Hunterdon paper. It's like, okay, Amma, I'll read and she's like, which show do you want to go to? And it had to, if it wasn't recommended by the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and hopefully both, she would not go. She was like, no, it's not a good show. I'm not going. I was like, Amma, what if you like it, but their theater critic doesn't like it? She refused to believe that a world like that could exist.
Yeah, and it's incredible how those, how many of those, if we were to go through and catalog, like from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, how many of those biases exist, or how many of those, those systems we have implemented as sort of a default setting in our mind.
Definitely. Yeah, you guys have both just given me a different way to think about this. The trust component. It's the concept I think that's often referred to as community, right? Community building, and do they have a strong community? Do they have loyal people following them? But that's thinking about it from the brand as opposed to the people who you're trying to reach, who aren't the brand. You're trying to reach their customers, and they have trust. So really interesting spin on it.
Yeah, so. I keep calling it, Mark. I keep calling it influence with no R marketing. It's influence marketing. Like, where are people influenced? How are they influenced? What do they pay attention to? That's and good. Attention, right? Like broad following is part of that. Like, do you reach a big enough group of people? Yeah. But then also, who are the people that you're reaching? Are they actually the same people that I'm trying to go after as customers? And then do they trust you? Does getting my message in their work? Or is it going to be like, the NPR Money Talks piece where it hits some of the right people, but just doesn't make an impact?
Or is there a disconnect between the messaging? Are we saying the thing? Are we talking to the right people, but saying the wrong thing to speak to their need?
Yes, this is huge too. So we worked with this firm called Conversion Rate Experts. I don't know if you've ever talked to the guys over there, like Carl Blanks and Ben Jessen. They're genius. You should have one of them on the show sometime because they're like amazing guys. But they have this like methodology where they interview your existing customers who are getting the most value from your product. And then it's an agency. And then they take the words and phrases that many people who love your product use, and they essentially turn that into your marketing message. So like, that's how they write the landing page. They just write it the way your existing customers, they find like, oh, like 10 people said they use SparkToro to do X and Y and Z. So your new landing page is use SparkToro to do X, Y, and Z. Right. And it is like, it's dumb that it works so well.
That's great.
It's annoying because it's too simple, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you find those processes like that, you can look back on them and be like, man, how come everyone wasn't doing it this way? But they're magical. Yeah.
Obviously, I should have thought of that.
And sometimes you'll find that something that your clients or your user base loves is the thing that you felt, oh, that was just a a little add-on. It wasn't even the thing we spent, weeks and weeks perfecting in our sprints.
We had this with, so like SparkToro added demographics in June. And I was kind of like, we'll see how it goes. Like, I don't know. I'm not expecting a whole bunch, right? But people freaking love their gender and age and like, degree level of education and geographic distribution. Like marketers are still kind of classic. Some of them, at least. I think there's a lot of researchers who are like, I want that data. I want to present it. But yeah, you can kind of see the stats since then. And SparkToro was like,
well, this goes back to, this goes back to your original comment about kind of what you've been thinking about with product versus marketing. And in an interesting way, I think they're kind of inseparable at modern companies, right? If you, especially in a world where I don't know exactly what your conversion funnels or your marketing funnels look like, but I would imagine it's as low touch as possible, right? It doesn't. You don't have a sales team in house
with 3 people.
So, when you're trying to sell your product via a website, and the website is your salesperson, your marketing has to be aligned with your product, right? So it's this constant iterative dance that you're going back and forth, and that's really hard because you can't do one without the other. So you have to build something first, and you have to build some amount of it first for it to be even like understandable. But that's a really neat space I've found myself in at our company. Since we've started building our marketing team out, is really getting to dive in there and understand that dynamic, having been mostly on the tech side previously.
Yeah, I don't know if did you read, what's her name? April Dunford's book? I think it's Obviously Awesome.
No, I don't think so.
I have not.
Highly recommend it. I gave it to Casey. I don't think I have a copy here.
Awesome.
Oh, but it doesn't matter. We're not on video anyway. So if I hold it up to the camera, it's not like your audio listeners will be like, ooh, look at
we'll link in the show notes.
We're thinking of rolling out video in 22, so you've got to come back.
Okay.
You have an amazing Zoom room, by the way.
You're prepared. We would look. I look terrible on video right now.
This is not true at all. Plus, I'm not running a marathon, so
that's great.
I'm eating my pasta.
You have Jake up there, so that's all that counts.
But yeah, so April sort of writes about this like positioning problem, where essentially you would take a company's product, change nothing about it. All you would do is change the way you are presenting the problem and what problem you're presenting that's being solved by the product.
Right.
And this would, she has example after example of like, well, look at the amazing results it got at this company and this company and this company. And I always think of her on stage, as I saw her on stage a few times, like saying, oh, you're not a blah, blah, blah. You're a product that solves this for these people. And the CEO, would invariably be like, no, that's not what you are. And April would be like, just try putting it on the homepage. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, that outside perspective is so helpful sometimes, all the time.
What was that book? What was the title again? I grabbed a pen.
I think it's called Obviously Awesome.
Obviously Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we might be at that time where we've got to wind things down here. We're a little over. This has been wonderful chatting with you, Rand. I love the energy you bring to the conversation.
Right back at you.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is quite a pleasure and honor for me.
Oh, my God. Please. Anytime you guys
your body of work.
Yeah, just drop me a line and let's absolutely stay in touch. I look forward to it.
I love it. That's wonderful. Well, thanks to our listeners again for hanging out. This has been the DataDriven Marketer, sponsored by NetWise. I'm Brian.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Rand.
Thanks for joining, Rand. Oh, and before I let you go, where can people find you?
Oh,
other than Googling
you can check us out at SparkToro.com. Sign up. We got a forever free account. You mentioned our funnel. It's freemium, no surprise. And if you want to follow me and all my wacky opinions, the best place to do that is Twitter, where I'm at RandFish.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Likewise.
Enjoyed it.
Take it easy, everybody. Cheers.